So this is what I'm showing you how to make. A ring shank with an interesting texture from using a firebrick. And the inspiration is from Navajo tufa casting. Look it up. So this is a firebrick that I got from a brick manufacturer. And I want this texture for my ring. Now normally I would do that with a lost wax casting. I would make the pattern in wax and then I'd cast it. Now what I'm going to do is just carve a channel in this and back it up with charcoal so that I get smooth surface on the inside and I get this pattern on the outside. So the first thing we have to do is get our ring size. I know mine is 19 millimeters inside diameter. I'm going to make this about 2 millimeters thick. So I can just add that 2 millimeters to 19 multiplied by 3.14 and that'll give me my length. And that's the length that I need to carve the channel in this, plus leaving room for a little funnel to pour the metal in. So 21 times 3.14, 66 millimeters. Now, 66 is to here, and I want a funnel. So what I'm going to do is just mark this with my Sharpie. So the funnel's going to be about like this. And we'll make that 70 just to make sure we have enough. So my channel is going to be in here. And what I need is a piece of material that I can, so I'm using I'm using a drill shank to make my pattern. So what I'm going to do is just put my straight edge on my material, and I'm just going to drag this until I have a depth of about 2 millimeters. Now we don't want it too deep or it'll be too thick to bend. So there's my channel. And we'll brush this out so that we get our textured pattern. And I'm just going to brush that with a little paintbrush. And you can see it has the nice texture in there that we're going to get. And I'll cut my funnel in there just using the jeweler's saw. So it looks like this. So we have a nice funnel and a nice clear channel. If there are any little lumps in there, you can take them out now just by scratching on it. Then what I'm going to do is rub this and this on a piece of coarse sandpaper just to make sure they're both flat. And you can do it on your bench top if you want. Just make sure there are no lumps underneath it. And I knew this one had a bump that I needed to take off. I'm happy with that. And my charcoal. This was a fairly new block, so I was pretty sure that it was flat. And then I'm just going to rub them together, and I can see whether they're flat or not, and you can just have a look, because you can't have any gaps, otherwise the metal will just run right out the bottom. So I'm pretty happy with that, and I'm just going to tape this so that my funnel is here, and I'm just going to use masking tape. So we want it nice and snug. Top, middle, and bottom. I was going to use cuttlefish for this because cuttlefish has a nice pattern, and we will use cuttlefish at a later date. But for now, I'm just going to use this. So I'm just going to brace this in my pumice pan, and we'll figure out the metal that we need. And so we could just figure it roughly by guesstimating. We know the width of the channel is 6.5 millimeters. We know the depth is about 2, and the length is 65, roughly. So we just multiply those three together. That will give us a cubic millimeter size. Shift the decimal point 3 to the left, it'll give you cubic centimeters, and we know 1 cubic centimeter of sterling weighs 10.4 grams. So we just multiply that out, and it'll tell us how much metal we need. And then I would add another 10 grams just to make sure it fills up the little sprue button. So I have 14.5 grams in here, which should be more than enough. I've got this braced in my pumice pan with my double third hand, so it's not going to go anywhere. So I'm using the bigger flame this time, just because I have it. I want the metal nice and liquid. Lovely. Turn off the gas, turn off your bottles, put your crucible so that it can cool. And when we don't see red on the end of our button anymore, we'll open this up. And like I said, these are both good insulators, so you're not going to burn yourself until you open this. I'll just cut the tape using my massive Swiss Army knife. Now this doesn't look hot, but it's bloody hot, so quench it before you touch it. Just quench it in water. And now we'll scrub out the residual stone, and we'll have our pretty little ring shank. Okay, I'm really happy with this. I just scrubbed the brick dust out with a wire brush under the water tap. There's still a little bit in there, but it'll come out. I really like the texture. So now we need to saw this end off and file it flat, and then we can measure our length. So I sawed that off, and you can see that it's a nice solid bit of metal in there. So use your Swiss number 2 cut file, nice and flat, and we can measure. I know this is supposed to be 60. I think it was 64. I'll have to do my calculations again to get my numbers. And this is we're still going to have to figure 3 millimeters tall because of the way these come up. So $19 plus 3 times 3.14, 69. And you can just dial in your calipers, measure it, mark it, and it's going to be just at the very end here. So saw and file once again. Put your button in the scrap to be melted down and used at a later date. File the end nice and flat. And we're going to form this into a ring now and solder it. I'm going to use my Pepe ring bender, and I've got the nylon bit on the inside so that it doesn't damage my material. Now when you have a casting, you have to just bend it a little bit at a time because it's normally brittle. So what I'll do is I'll bend it about halfway and then I'll anneal it. So you can see that we have this nice pattern with no damage at all onto the material. So now I'll anneal it and we'll finish bringing this together. So dry the metal. I have annealed it. Go back on your ring bender. So you can see it's pretty much the size. Now what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to anneal it again and just tap this down with my rawhide hammer. I'm not going to put pliers on this at all. So dry the metal, always dry the metal. And I've just got a piece of timber on my bench. pretty good. I think what I'm going to have to do is saw down through a few times because it's touching on the inside and I have a gap on the outside, and I don't want to hammer it any farther down than that. So that's quite simple to do. So just brace it against your bench peg and saw right in the cut at about a 45-degree angle. And do this as many times as you need to get a nice, perfect join. You can see our pattern is all over the place, but what we want is to get it as close as we can, and it won't look too bad. And we've got a really good join on the inside and a tolerable join up here. So let's solder it. So stir up your flux if you haven't. We want it nice and creamy. And we're just going to flux both sides. And because castings are porous, I'm going to use two long pieces of hard solder, and I'm going to place them with my solder pick. Let's get the heat cranked up a bit because this is a large piece of metal. I'm just brushing back and forth on the join, and I've placed the ball of solder right on the join. So there, it flowed, and I heated it from underneath just to make sure that it flowed all the way through. So quench it, have a look. I'm quite happy with that. I can see the solder on both sides. And we'll pickle it, round it up, hallmark it, and tidy it up, and we're done. So you can actually see where the solder came through. I may have to get a little ball burr and tidy this up a bit so that it matches a little better, but it's doable. So I'm out of the pickle, dry the metal. I know I go on about it, but you want to dry it before you put it on a steel tool, otherwise your tool will rust. And we're just going to use our rawhide hammer again. So just slowly work your way down. Flip it over. And when you can look at the end and you can see that it's nice and round, stop. I've got the ring out of the tumbler, and I'm just going to whiz up the inside using the split mandrel. And I'll hallmark it. And we're done. So there it is, my ring shank using a fire brick.